Are you recording?
And recording.
Alright, so my name's Dan, this is Sid. We're part of the Simple School team, along with Rishi, who couldn't be with us today. And we have a product coming out in the near
Well,
future.
I don't think we should
which
start
is
with the
called-
product at all.
Yeah, we're gonna say it.
Okay.
But no, we'll cut you out interrupting my ass.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a product coming out called The Guide to the 21st Century, and Sid's gonna elaborate more about it.
Okay. So we're the Simple School, and it has come to our observation that the majority of the things that we learn in school, regardless of where in the system we are, in the sense sixth grade, middle school, high school, college, regardless of where an individual is, the majority of content that is thrown at us is simply irrelevant. And not in the sense that, oh, if you're gonna become an economist, then there's obviously we have a class for that. But not in that sense. In the sense that there's a certain foundational bunch of knowledge that everyone should know. And it's applicable to whoever, regardless of what their career choices, whatever their aspirations are. So it is this foundational set of knowledge that we refer to when we say that the content that we learn in school is irrelevant. And in fact, it's nowhere near what we actually should know, and that's what we made. That's what our product is, and it's essentially 2 years of college, because everyone has to do a certain set of core classes that regardless of what major you are, you have to do, and that's what we made in an online course. So basically, it's 2 years of college in that you can theoretically do in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what most schools bundle as the general education part of your career, of your college career, or also most liberal schools call it the liberal studies part of the
Liberal arts.
curriculum, liberal arts. All right, so yeah. So the format, the way the program's gonna work is we have a number of chits in this bowl. We're gonna pick them out at random, and depending on what topic comes out, we're just gonna have a chat about it. So
And I like to preface it by saying that so the chits that we have are each represent one subject of our general education curriculum that we made. So for example, one of the subjects is financial literacy. So financial literacy is one subject in our general education program, and so that's how we're trying to structure this. So whatever subject we pick out of the bowl of chits, they will always pertain to a subject or a field of knowledge that everyone should know about.
yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and start out with the first chit. And the first chit is philosophy plus creative thinking plus theory of knowledge. Alright, do you want to start out with anything?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is philosophy isn't really seen as, something everyone should know.
The problem with philosophy is that I think it's being marginalized in the educational system because rather than it being one of the courses that you take as part of your career, which in some schools it is, in our school it is, they made it into a whole major, which is not something bad, but it marginalizes the subject and it gives people the feeling that unless they're not studying philosophy, then there's no point in learning the basics. And many people just blow this course over. It's not offered, at least as a compulsory course in many universities. And yeah, I think that's a big problem because philosophy helps you understand why you think the way you think, and it's also a type of historical lesson of how knowledge and how thinking and rational thinking and logic have developed from a very, very early, very, what should I call it?
Yeah, like science. Like I'm sure no one would dispute the value of science, like technology. No one would dispute that, right?
Exactly.
But ironically, science back in the day, before it was known as science, was natural philosophy.
Exactly.
That's what it was called.
Exactly. So it's just understanding where all our logic and all our rational thinking today comes from.
Yeah.
And there's a few things to study from that, because philosophy opens the door to a lot of behavioral patterns that we as humans share, and we have examples of that in different philosophical currents.
Like what?
For example, if we think about the Machiavellic philosophical current, which basically it's I'm forgetting the word. But basically what it dictates is that you should do whatever benefits you the most. Basically, the the end justifies the means. It's basically what that current says, and it really shows in today's world and today's social and political landscape. Because if you think about it, consumerism and corporate America is an exaggeration of this philosophy, because we see it today. Corporations don't care if they're destroying the planet, if they're killing people with their products, or whatever it may be. They're concerned about the bottom line, and nobody questions them for it, because they're pragmatic is the word. Everybody has a very pragmatic approach to life today. Now we do see a change in that. Now a lot of people are becoming a lot more conscious about social and environmental issues, but we human beings as a society tend to take things to the extreme. So we've gone from being concerned with the planet and being concerned with social justice to kind of making a cult out of each and every single one. And not to say that many people are not working towards making it better, but at the same time, a lot of people are just jumping on the bandwagon, not understanding what they're preaching and just repeating what they hear, and that causes a lot of misinformation.
Just to play devil's advocate here, wouldn't you say that's how any movement starts? Like it has to be cult-like. I'm not saying cults are good or bad, but any large-scale movement, and I'm sure you wouldn't disagree that fighting against climate change is a pretty large-scale movement. Doesn't it have to start like that? Like I agree with you when you say that people need to educate themselves before just blatantly fighting for one line of thought. That I agree with, but isn't there some value in a movement being godlike?
I mean, this is a matter of opinion. I personally think that we can't see the movements that are rising up today the same way, to the same lens that we saw the movements that rose up through time, because the interconnectivity, the interconnected world that we live in today is something that's not precedented. So whereas before, yes, many people jumped on a movement because it became popular, which is what always happens. And many people were not necessarily talking out of a place of knowledge, but more out of a place of bickering and repeating. In today's world, it's so easy to spread information and misinformation that we can't necessarily accept the wide scale bickering and the wide scale just repeating that we accepted in past movements in time, because it's exponential now. If you put something in social media and it becomes viral, catches on, what used to happen in a matter of months can happen in a matter of minutes in today's world. So we have to be a lot more conscious of what people are following and how people are interpreting the different problems. And not to say things like climate change and stuff like that don't matter and people shouldn't jump on that bandwagon. Is the reality of the world is that we're in a way we're killing the world, but we're not really killing the world, because if we manage to completely destroy everything, the planet's still gonna be there. It's us that are gonna be gone. So we're kind of destroying ourselves.
Yeah. I don't think you're saying that supporting a movement is bad at all. I don't think you're saying that. But what you're saying is when you do
inform yourself before you dedicate your life and most of your day and most of your attention and most of your energy
and
to a movement.
I think honestly, when that happens, it's not. It's. I mean, there are several factors, but one of the other factors are that people just want to be part of a group. You just want to be part of some community, maybe, you know, the people supporting climate change, the people, against, not against, but for feminist rights, or whatever it is. So it's
Yeah,
more about just like, I want to be part of something.
I mean, and that's always been the case. I mean, several studies have been done, and you can find them online everywhere. I think we watched a video last year, end of last year, where we saw how a woman was put into some kind of doctor's office, and people just randomly started standing up. Obviously,
That
they
was
were
our
all
battle
actors.
class.
Was that a bad
That
class?
was
Oh
our-
wow, I thought we watched it here.
No.
Well, yeah. Point is,
That's the worst class, by the way. Anyway, continue.
yeah. Point is, people want to belong, and that feeling completely negates the need of informing yourself, and that can lead you in a very deep hole that you will necessarily not be able to get out of. And if you do, I'm not saying this is for every single idea, but this is what can happen if you just follow something
happen.
blindly. You can get yourself in a deep hole, and then once you get out, if you do get out, if not, you're intellectually dead. If you do decide to listen to reason and eventually get out of the movement, your whole idea and your whole conception of what's right and your moral compass will be shattered because you were blindly following something that you now understand is meaningless or was misdirection.
It's a
So
waste
again-
of time. I feel like that's the worst part.
Yeah, it's a waste of time and it can break your spirit. It's like people that were religious and then hear arguments that fundamentally change their ideas.
I think that's slightly different because, not for all, but I mean,
I mean,
a significant number, I would say that it's a sense of liberation.
I mean,
I mean, it
coming
depends,
from
yeah.
where I come from,
Fair enough.
when it's part of your life in the way that I see many movements being today, it can really shatter your reality.
Definitely.
And going farther from that, and this is just a general comment for everything, if you don't have the capacity to listen to somebody who doesn't agree with you and understand, deeply think in your being that that person might know something you don't, you should reconsider the way you approach problems and the way you think because it's fundamentally wrong.
Wait, see that again? I don't think I followed you.
If you cannot have a conversation with somebody that thinks differently than you in any topic, really,
see.
it's more abundant in this divisive topics, or however you say that, this polarizing
Yeah,
topics.
it creates echo chambers.
But yeah, if you can't listen to somebody and understand that that person might know something you don't, then you should reconsider the way you think because it's not logical.
And just to add to that, if someone says something counter to what you believe to be true, you shouldn't instinctively shoot their viewpoint down. You know what I'm saying? Like you shouldn't automatically judge what they're saying to be incorrect just because it's different from what you think.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that topic might have reached its natural end.
I wanna just tie it all back to
Okay.
philosophy because that's the shit we started with, and we ended with religion. And I feel like religion, even though at least in our school, it was given its own like set of classes.
Oh yeah, we had to take 2 theology classes.
Exactly, and I don't think there's anything wrong with theology classes, but religion, the existence of religion, the value of religion, is actually like the philosophical question that's most relevant to today. And in all my philosophy classes, and I suspect for the vast majority of people, their philosophy classes have always been filled with, the like Aristotle, Plato, Platonic thinking, Descartes, or whatever it may be, all the historical prominent philosophical figures. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a whole semester, half a year, only on that, in my opinion, it really, it's very easy to find the irrelevance of philosophy when that's all you're taught. Instead, if we could actually in class debate a relevant philosophical question that's relevant to today, i.e., the role of dogma, the value of dogma, like remember the debate that was going on between Sam Harris and John Peterson. That's basically what they were debating, and that's the philosophical question that's most relevant today. And I feel like if that was done in classrooms, it could the connection between the relevance to today's world and the subject is so much more easy.
Yeah, the thing is, philosophy is taught, at least in the places where I've had the chance to study it, other than by myself, philosophy is being taught like a hard skill, like a memory type of thing. And that is fundamentally wrong because those ideas are now, at least from the objective point of view, outdated and useless. What those ideas serve is in understanding how people think, because fundamentally that's how people started thinking, and that's how they found logical explanations to questions of existence, of gods, and more mundane things. But essentially, that's how people, that's a fundamental base of logic and rationality. So I think personally, this philosophy class should maybe be, that should be taught because it's important
But
to,
not a whole
yeah, they should be a
semester.
segue into
Yeah.
more modern topics.
Like maybe, I mean, I'm just speaking on the top of my mind here, but maybe a month tops. Like,
Yeah, a third of the class, a semester is roughly 4 months, maybe 5 months long. So a month, maybe a month and a half of understanding, not just teaching for the test and knowing that Plato said this in this year, but rather understanding, being able to articulate the philosophies and why those came about, because historical context in philosophy is extremely important. If you put
historical context in anything,
in everything, if you put the words of Plato in today's context, in today's social landscape and today's political landscape, he would be an abomination and he would not be taken
just
seriously.
give me a quick summary on his line of thought.
Plato, essentially, to make a very big and broad topic short,
Yeah.
he believed that democracy, oligarchy, and so forth are imperfect forms of government, and he envisioned this government where one person was chose based on their. He explained it in a way where that person who's being chosen is the philosopher. He's the ultimate, the master philosopher, and he is the
dictatorship.
what?
Isn't that a dictatorship?
Yes.
So Plato advocated for dictatorships?
In a very loose way, yes, he did.
Wow, I did not know that.
But if you read the book, which the name's escaping me now, but I think it's called The Republic. I'm pretty sure it's called The Republic.
Okay.
The way he talks about it is very, first of all, it's in very loose terms, and second of all, it's very appropriate for the time. Because if you have a bunch of Greek villagers, essentially.
I mean, there were slaves as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that also adds to the context. But if you have let's talk about the people of the Republic.
Okay.
If you have a bunch of villagers, essentially, who can read or write, much less think logically, a democracy becomes.
Yeah, it's useless.
Yeah, it becomes a faulty idea.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. If you were to insert that line of thinking in today's landscape, he'll be called a communist and a tyrant and so forth.
Yeah.
Because essentially he was talking about himself in the book, him being the master philosopher.
Oh, this was his book?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. When you think about it, it's crazy. And we look up to these people because we can see beyond the literal things they were trying to say, and we can appreciate, whether subconsciously or consciously, how advanced they were in their thinking for the time, and not just in their ideas, but in the way they got to those ideas. That's what should be taught in classrooms. And then we can segue into more complex topics such as, it ranges from, like you said, dogma, abortion, women's rights, the topic of equality, which could be a major in itself, and so forth.
Isn't it? I'm pretty sure this.
In today's day, everything's amazing.
Yeah.
but that's whether that's good or bad is a topic for another day.
Yeah, fair enough.
But so yeah, I think this might have reached its natural conclusion when we pull the next up.
Okay.
All right, emotional intelligence and psychology. Again, why don't we try it out for today? You start off, and
Yeah, I know
We'll
what you're
segue
gonna
into
say,
stuff.
so might as well start with that. And 12 rules of life
12 rules for life.
for life.
Well, I mean, if we want to go that way,
Why not?
for the viewers who don't know, 12 Rules of Life is what I think an amazing book that everybody should read. Which it's written by Professor Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a behavioral psychologist. At least he was in the University of Toronto. I don't know if he's still there,
I
but
think
now
he was like suspended or something.
I know he was suspended for. I don't know if he was definitely suspended, like indefinitely, but he definitely had some troubles with the university because of
Because of
his polarizing ideas. Which
no,
one
he was against the. There was a law being passed in Canada that said compelled speech. So like for a transgender individual, you were legally obligated
yeah
to refer to
call
them
them by the
as their
pronoun they
pronouns.
yeah.
Yeah, and he was against that.
And even though at first that's a great segue into cracking into the book. Even though at first on the superficial level he sounds like a insensitive person, because why wouldn't you call somebody by their pronoun or whatever they want to be called? Why wouldn't you be nice to somebody and play along
Yeah.
to whatever they want? But when you think about it, the case that he was making for it was that he was basically saying that if he was forced to call somebody by something, if he was compelled to do that by law, then they would be directly infringing in his freedom of speech. Which, when you come to think about it, at least in my opinion, he's absolutely right. Because you can do all sorts of crazy things under the freedom of
Yeah.
speech.
I don't think like if someone went to him and said, "Would you please refer to me as such and such?" I don't think he would say no.
No, matter of fact, he's addressed this many times in his different talks. He said in interviews and such that if somebody wants to be called by their pronoun, he will happily call them that. He has a problem with being compelled by the
Yeah.
government to call him that and to call them that. And I think that's completely valid. I think
Yeah.
it's a fair point.
But it's crazy because like now, I think he has 1 million plus subscribers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's
Like, he has-
he's blown up.
Insane number of followers.
What we were talking about, what might have happened a matter of months
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
happened in a matter of probably weeks for Jordan Peterson, because he blew up, and it turns out people liked what he was saying, and
Yeah.
I don't doubt many people don't understand the message that he's trying to put out there. And if you take his words out of context, it might be appealing to groups that are not necessarily the most tolerant or central in their political and social views, but that's besides the point. Point is, let's go back to 12 Rules of Life. It lays out 12 rules that you should abide for in order to be basically a functional being in society and find what he calls being a being with a capital B, which essentially means being fulfilled by what you're doing and find what we call happiness, but it's more of a general
Fulfillment. I think that's about
fulfillment,
Yeah.
peace. That's where I was going. And it's interesting because the first rule of the book is stand up straight with your shoulders back. And he starts out by talking about how we are very similar to lobsters, which is a thought that he's been ridiculed by.
I don't think he said that. I don't think he said that we're similar
Okay,
to lobsters. I think he
we-
said that
we
something
share-
learned from the biology.
we
stuff.
share similar biological
Yeah.
traits, is what I meant. And he's been ridiculed by it but the people who ridicule him clearly haven't read the book, because what
Oh,
he
yeah.
says,
100%.
what he says is that just like lobsters, some animals that are extremely ancient in comparison to us, because lobsters were around before human beings were even in the horizon of being a thing.
Yeah.
And they follow this hierarchy structure in which the head lobster, for lack of a better word, the more powerful lobster, will place itself on
Like the alpha male.
exactly that kind of idea.
Yeah.
They will place itself on the top of their food chain,
Their
And
societal structure.
their societal structure, and everything will be geared around them. But if a lobster gets too tyrannical and they're hoarding all the resources, a couple lobsters or a few lobsters that might be smaller might band up together and overthrow that lobster. And if you think about it, human beings are exactly the same way. Like you said before, we try to belong, and that is because hierarchy is embedded in our biology. It's embedded in our psyche. It's embedded in who we are. And it is, at least in my opinion, utterly impossible and frankly stupid, to not use other words, to think that we can ever create a society where everybody is exactly the same, because that has been proven over and over again that it doesn't work.
Elaborate on what you mean by exactly the same.
Exactly the same in the sense that people, I'll explain this to you with another concept. People talk about equality, right? Equality of opportunity. And
No, what most people like, those people that we're talking about who don't inform themselves before jumping on the bandwagon.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure this is just an opinion as well, but I'm pretty sure they always mean equality of outcome.
that is exactly where I was going.
People.
There we go. Technical difficulties. People who talk about equality of opportunity are most often referring to equality of outcome, which is utterly stupid, because
That's been done before, and it's failed.
it's been tried, it's been done, and the most functional example that we have of equality of opportunity, because equality of outcome is impossible. Equality of opportunity is countries like Scandinavia, where the man and the female, to just put one of the examples, are completely free to choose whatever career path they want, and they will not be hindered by inequality of pay because of their sex or so forth. And whilst most doctors continue to be men, most nurses continue to be women, and that alludes to the basic psychology, the basic nature of who we are, because men by nature are going to be more prone to working longer hours and finding meaning in their job and in whatever they do to produce for their family, while women, and this is a generalization and it might not be true in all cases, but it's something that when you look at metadata, it's observable. Women find meaning in nurturing because they are by definition nurturing beings. After all, we are born through a woman, not through men. I mean, men definitely play a part in that process, but they're definitely not the defining factor. You definitely need a woman. You can't have a child without a woman. That's just a fact. It's a biological fact.
You can't have a child without any.
You can go to if you're a woman, you can go to a sperm bank.
Yeah,
and that way you don't need men.
I agree with the essence of what you're saying, but the example is not what I agree with, because there are resources for even men to like.
I mean, yeah, but you can't.
I forget what they're called.
You can go to a sperm bank, but you can't go to a uterus bank.
Yeah, you can. Not a uterus bank, but you can find like women who just wanna.
Yeah, but even then, still, you need the woman to be there to be.
Okay, I think we're just going around in circles.
You're gonna run around.
You need both. Like,
you need both.
There's no debate here.
Okay. What I mean is that the woman is probably the one that carries the most burden, and is the one that has to be the most present. That's what I mean.
Yeah, especially when a child's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In childbirth.
Yeah.
And that's just ingrained in the biology of women, and that is why they find fulfillment, or at least they find fulfillment on average more.
By spending time with their children at home.
It's not even just spending time with children. It's any career that's nurturing in nature.
Okay.
That it's nursing. It's being staff at a
That has
senior
direct connection with other people's well-being.
exactly.
Okay.
It's making somebody's life objectively better
Mhm.
or easier. While men
and visibly.
what?
And visibly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While men will really find fulfillment in anything that allows them to support their family.
So anything that makes money.
Simplified, yes. Anything that makes money. And that is why, that is just one of the examples of the hierarchy. But another example steering away from the equality of opportunity, equality of outcome.
I think all viewers, or the one viewer, or no viewers, whatever it may be, should watch the Jordan Peterson Kathy Newman interview.
Oh, yes, they
It was
should.
hilarious.
They will learn a thing or two. If you watch that interview, you will really get a scope of who he is and of his general attitude towards
Yeah.
people that don't agree with him. Which, even though you might think it's gonna be denying and just avoiding questions, he goes into questions right head on, and he
keeps it cool, because like the interviewer, Kathy Newman, to our opinion, to many people's opinion, she was
rude.
she was coercing him. She was like fishing for
Oh, she
particular
was.
answers.
He called her out on the
Yeah.
interview. He called her out. She was just trying to fish for him to trip on his own words. But then he said it in the interview, and it's part of the book. He's very precise with his speech, as we all should be.
Yeah.
And so, well, going away into a different part of the hierarchy structure
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that, I mean, now more than ever, not more than ever, but in the recent future, we see a push for socialist and I don't want to say communist, but socialist tendencies, especially in younger people. And I think that is the result of a number of things, especially the world landscape and
Correct me if I'm wrong, but socialist means left leaning, right?
yeah, socialist is traditionally leaning towards the left. Now, left and right, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah,
That-
we talk about that when we pick out the
Exactly.
politics shit.
But far as socialist ideas, that is, it's a push for younger people, and the reason for that is that if you think about it, the people that came before us were the kids of people who fought in the war, in World War II. Things were not easy for them back then. Things were horrible. I can't even imagine living that time period. The kids of those people were born into abundance, especially in the West. I mean, except in Europe, especially in America, I would say, because they were born into extreme wealth that came from the war, whether people accept it or not. Just general economic uprising.
Like the baby booms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they did everything they could to make it as easy as possible for us and the generation that comes after us, the kids who are maybe not yet 18. They made everything extremely
I
easy.
think they're called Gen Z.
I think so.
I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Anyway, continue.
They made it extremely easy for us in comparison to how it was for them.
Honestly, for us, like we're 21, 22.
Oh yeah.
Life's been pretty easy.
When I say,
like
I
society.
mean all of us.
Yeah.
They built a society where hardship, at least in the first world,
Yeah.
and in many third world countries, obviously not in the whole.
And I just wanna put a side note here, just to avoid people misinterpreting the general idea. We're not saying that there aren't hardships. There are a plethora of hardships that many hardships that people should not go through do exist.
Let's
What we're
just
trying to say is that compared to before,
exactly. Everything that we say here, we're not talking about individual cases or even sectored cases. We're talking about the meta of it all,
Yeah, macro.
like the macro, the addition, the bottom line of it all. When you put it all together and
Yeah,
compare it to the bottom
aggregate.
line of
Yeah.
the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So everything's a lot easier, and it also helped that technology decided to start growing exponentially
Oh yeah.
around the what is it the
No, the technology started really picking speed because of the war.
yeah, exactly.
And
I mean, the first, well, I mean, I don't know if this is completely factual, but at least to general knowledge or to my knowledge, the first real computing device was devised in the war in order to build.
No. The first computing device, could be wrong, but I think it was by a guy named Babbage, Charles Babbage, I think. This was before the war. It wasn't anything like computers today, obviously. But what happened during the war, what they're referring to is
The Turing machine.
Alan Turing, yeah. So the Enigma machine. That was more of a cryptographic leap.
That was at least
But it was definitely it was definitely a huge step in
to
creating.
my. It was probably the first step towards a modern computer
yeah, no,
that we
it
see
was,
today.
it was. I can confidently say it was a significant step.
It was.
Yeah.
I think that's an understatement to say it was significant, but I don't think words can explain
Yeah.
how important this was.
Yeah.
The point is, after that, obviously technology compounds on itself, so it skyrocketed. And what we find today is that for us and for a generation after us, life has been a little too easy
For every generation
after
since
basic.
the Industrial Revolution, life gets better, barring disasters, natural disasters. But on average, every generation since the Industrial Revolution, life gets better.
Exactly. And that's made our lives a little too easy, which I think, at least in my opinion, has made us, and by us I don't mean any specific group of people, but our generation as a whole, maybe a little lazier, a little we want everything more spoon fed towards us.
I feel now you're getting into the stereotypical millennial rant.
I don't think I'm getting to the stereotypical because yeah, the stereotypes. I mean, let's first face off. Stereotypes are
It's pretty well observed that every generation, their preceding generation, so like not even like their parents, you will always find the parents saying that life is so easy for you, life was harder back then.
yeah, exactly, and I mean, we can sit all day here and see and debate.
But the important part is that even though life is much easier now, the thing is with every generation when they come into the world, that becomes their baseline. So I feel there's an element of like it's unfair to say that you're lazy.
I mean, maybe lazy is the wrong word. We are used to a level of
Convenience, ease.
yeah. We're used to a level of comfort and level of availability that might not have been there. That was definitely not there before. But it's funny because, I mean, we see it in socialism is basically an idea where we all put in maybe not the same type of effort and we all get the same outcome. Because the reality of life is that not all jobs are as complex or as technical or as hard to do, for lack of a better word.
What do you mean by that?
If
Like
most
some
of your
jobs
money,
require
if
physical
most of the
labor.
money that you earn is taken away in taxes,
Yeah.
and that those taxes say in a perfect government where corruption doesn't exist, which that doesn't exist either.
Those are two mutually exclusive.
Well, exactly. Well, if we assume then those taxes will go towards leveling out the excess money that you're making with the lack of money that, say, the garbage man is making. So it comes in the form of welfare. Are you familiar?
So you're saying at the end of the day, after all this compensation business is done, everyone is earning the same amount of money. Is that what you're saying?
Everybody, yeah,
But isn't that equality of outcome again?
exactly. That's what socialism strives for, and that in a way, yeah, it's easy to push for that when you don't have a clear plan as to how you're gonna make it happen and just ask for it. Which, for example, in the
Wait, just
yeah,
wait. So how did we get here? What is the overarching point
oh,
in terms of
hierarchies.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting it. So we see this socialism rise, especially in South America with the recent protests. They're all pushing for one idea or the other. It's something of that has the left in its essence. And what I see, at least, I might be wrong about this, but I've educated myself, or I would consider well in these topics, and I've been following the news. And
above average?
what?
Above average.
Above average, I would say, yeah, above average. I've been striving to follow the news. It's not been my sole purpose, but it's been one of my priorities, at least when I was on the peak of it. Is that people are complaining a lot, but they're not proposing any solutions. And where I'm going with this is people complain about the capitalism model and about how there's a 1% that holds 80% of the wealth or something like that. But what people fail to realize is that 1% is in constant change. That one, everybody, I don't know if I'm exaggerating the statistic, but I believe I read it somewhere. Everybody every year has around a 10% chance of getting to the 1% of their respective society.
Wait, every year,
Everybody,
10% of a population.
everybody has 10% chance of becoming the 1%.
Every member of a given population.
Yeah, obviously excluding people in extreme conditions.
Where the structure of society allows it.
Exactly.
So you're saying every person has a 10% shot of getting the 1%.
Not 10% shot. It's important to be precise with speech.
Okay.
10% probability. That's not the same thing.
Okay.
That means
That's what I
that
meant.
out of all the people, I mean, there's definitely people who have no interest in doing it, or no.
I don't know. I find
Maybe.
how
it's
do you
included.
calculate something like that?
I don't know. It was part of a talk I was watching.
Okay, fair enough.
I might be exaggerating the number, but the point is not to get hung up in the
Yeah.
exact number, but to understand that the 1% that holds up most of the wealth is in constant change. So why should somebody give up their hard-earned money
Yeah.
because another person, I mean, yeah, there's definitely being born into it 100%, but we also see cases all the time of people who were born into absolutely nothing,
Yeah.
and through hard work, dedication, and intelligence, they get to be that 1%. How are we gonna justify?
So every year, there are a significant portion. I think the number is like 70, around the 70% mark. There are like around, like I said, around 70% of the new millionaires every year are self-made.
Exactly. So how are we gonna justify taxing those people a large number of their income and of their wealth? What's that gonna do? That's just gonna make high millionaires, I mean the hundreds of millions, and billionaires just go to a different country where this socialist ideas are not enforced, because
I think the most like the argument is mostly directed to the billionaires, the people who have excessive amounts of money, like for example Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, but
Like
I mean,
100, like
actually talking about this, Bill Gates got interviewed, I think it was at the end of last year, and he said basically that he is all for charity, charitable actions.
Yeah.
Actually, like, more than his words, we see it with actions.
Yeah.
That man is probably one of the most charitable people.
Oh, dude,
In the
he's
recent-
probably the most influential human being of our
Exactly.
time.
And he said he has no problem with charity and with using his money for the greater good.
Mhm.
But when the government comes in and tells him that he's gonna get taxed 90% of his wealth,
Yeah.
then he has a problem. And now
Yeah.
this actually segues into the second problem of trying to break down the hierarchy, the hierarchy structures that we have in place.
Mhm.
And it's that, like we said, government is never not going to be corrupt. They're corrupt to different extents in different countries,
Yeah.
but it's virtually impossible.
Yeah, I think this is the main issue when it comes to the argument against large taxations. Is there's absolutely no accountability
Exactly.
function for using those additional funds, because the argument people make is, oh, if you get more tax, if you have a higher wealth tax, the more money in that comes in, the more money can be used for public good.
Yeah,
But there's no accountability. There's no possible way of linking the additional funds to the additional
exactly. And
benefit.
corruption to any extent is always going to be there in every government. It would be foolish to think any single person, any single group of people is gonna end corruption, because, like you said, the people who are stealing the money are the people in charge of policing the people who are stealing the money. So
Yeah.
obviously there's always going to be somebody that's going to pull a fast one. And
Yeah.
to try to rely completely on government and abandon the market structure, which is by its nature a hierarchy, where the market dictates pretty much everything other than politics, everything economical, is foolish, and it's lazy, and it is utterly disappointing, because that just means that you don't want to do the work, or you don't believe you can achieve that level of success.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it.
Exactly. And that's just disappointing, because baby boomers, what was their underlying philosophy? It was that they work hard and they follow the rules, and that's the American dream. You come here, you work hard, you follow the rules, you pay your taxes, and you'll make money. And obviously that some people got that dream realized to different extents, but the dream, I feel like, now has become, oh, I am entitled to welfare and to basically crutches from the government.
I'm pretty sure is the younger people
It is.
like us.
It is, exactly. It is. It's I need to get a crutch from the government, because
Yeah.
I can't stand by myself. And that is maybe. This is not
That-
entirely this is I'm not saying this is 100% true, but I'm saying it's definitely a possibility, that the reason for that is because we've gotten it so easy that we don't know how to stand up ourselves. So we seek crutches and basically lifelines from different places. Obviously, you're going to turn to government for that in order to sustain us, because we don't feel like we are capable of sustaining ourselves. And that also goes along with, rising tension in the world, which is not great for economies. It doesn't apply to the United States, but if we go to South America,
Yeah, it's worse.
it's a lot more exponential there. You can see it a lot more. It's harder to get a job. It's actually, where I come from in Colombia, it's becoming increasingly hard to get a job, and that is just a job. Let's not even talk about wages.
Yeah.
But that also comes, and I'm not talking about specifically Colombia here, that also comes with a massive corruption system that's been brewed and hard-coded over the years. But yeah, anything that you wanted to add? Anything you want to say?
I did. I was just gonna say that the whole idea that that we whoever we may be, the general population, that we need a crutch. I definitely think that exists because that's literally what Andrew Yang's campaign is based on.
Exactly.
That's literally
Exactly.
his message.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm
I
saying.
think that's a great proof of concept. That shows that this line of thinking is very existent.
Yeah, it's almost tangible. It's so
Yeah.
present in our age group, all around. I mean, okay, I wouldn't say all around the world, but at least I can attest for United States, Central and South America. It's so, no matter where you're from, any of these countries in this particular vicinity, I'm sure this extends to other parts of the world, but I can't attest for it, so I haven't been there and I haven't talked to people from there. But I mean, you can talk about India after this.
Yeah.
But the younger people are crying out for crutches, and we haven't had any disasters happen in the recent time.
Yeah. I mean, the last one I would say is 2008.
Yeah, and we were kids.
Yeah.
We were
I don't have any recollection of that.
we were barely starting to develop our rational thoughts when this happened.
Our brains physiologically develops fully by 25.
Exactly.
So
At this point, we were basically starting to understand the nature of the natural world we live in.
how old was I? 2008. 2008.
I was 10 years old.
10. Yeah. I don't remember.
and so even though it might have affected us, it didn't really penetrate us in the same way that it did an adult who lost everything.
Yeah.
Also, neither of us are from the United States, so
No, 2008 was a global financial.
no, I know, but I mean, at least in Colombia it was bad. But
Yeah.
I mean, from what I hear and from what I've read, people here were destroyed by it. Their
No,
lives
yeah,
were,
no, they were
completely
Yeah.
crumbled by it.
They were.
But so,
Like I feel if a child of a father or a mother who got destroyed by 2008, they would have felt it more than us.
yeah,
For sure.
100%. That, like I said, like we weren't in the same proximity as other people
Yeah.
to the core of the issue.
Yeah.
Although it did affect virtually everybody in the world because it was
No,
it was a global
because
crisis.
the financial system is like the whole world financial systems are very closely linked with that of the US.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I lost my train of thought. Where are we going with this?
I think we were talking about
Crutches.
yeah, like
Oh,
how our generation hasn't really experienced a true disaster,
Exactly.
a disaster that was completely out of our control.
Exactly. Or maybe, well, yeah, a disaster was out of our control.
Yeah, so
A
I'm
major
actually
war.
scared. Like if that happens,
It's
oh dude,
there's a theory, if you will, that every 80 years a major disaster happens.
oh yeah, no, I'm sure
And
like
we're right on the clock for a major disaster, if that is true. And a major disaster not in the sense of a natural disaster, but a global disaster that's out of anybody's hands because of its sheer magnitude. For example, World War II.
Yeah, that was 45 ended.
It ended 45, yeah.
So what's that? 55, 65, 75. 75 years.
We're right on cue.
Yeah.
And
And
go ahead.
Trump assassination.
I mean, I'm gonna say personally, I don't think the Trump assassination. Okay, that sounds terrible. I should rephrase that. The assassination of the Iranian general by the Trump administration
Soleimani.
is gonna have any repercussions
No,
near.
did you see the interview of one of the other Iranian generals or ambassador?
I did not.
So I mean, this is just one part of it, but I remember him saying that his issue is not with the individual US citizen, he has no problem with them at all.
Oh,
His sole purpose now is to attack Trump.
oh no, I didn't see that from there, but I was watching a couple. They were doing some news cycles on the protests that were going on in Iran, and they interviewed this guy, and he said that he doesn't have any problem with Americans, that he loves Americans.
Yeah.
They has a problem with the president. And I mean, we're not in the politics shit just yet, so I don't know that we should
Anyway,
full
point is,
dive into it.
there's a very high likelihood within our lifetimes there might be one or several major disasters.
Just to clarify, this disaster is most probably and probably most definitely not gonna come from the assassination of General
Oh
Iran in
yeah, no,
general.
no.
That is an isolated event, very responsible in nature, if you ask me, but it didn't play out to majors because of how interconnected the world is politically right now. Because we have to understand, the next major global catastrophe might just be our last. Because now we have weapons of mass
I
destruction.
mean, that's not an incorrect thought process, but I wouldn't go as far as like spreading the fear that any next conflict will be the last, because we've had several wars
That's why I said
within the time of
that's why I said
nuclear weapons.
it's most definitely it's not most definitely
It
gonna be
can
the
be.
last,
It
but it
could
has
be.
the potential
It
to be
could
the
be.
last,
Yeah, it does definitely.
and that's definitely
Yeah.
somewhat of a scary thought, if you ask me.
Oh yeah.
Because now we have weapons that we cannot even comprehend how damaging, how devastating they will be. What happened in Japan in World War II
Yeah.
is absolutely nothing but a speck of dust compared to what can happen
Oh yeah.
with the weapons that the 5 countries that are allowed to have nuclear weapons possess today.
Only 5 then?
I think it's only 5, yes.
There's only a handful.
It's only a handful. I'm if I'm not wrong, it's 5, but I'm not completely certain on that. Point is, it's a handful. But that's the thing. All you need is a handful of countries to rub each other the wrong
You just
way.
need you honestly need just 2.
I mean, yeah, but I'm talking about for a world war conflict.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Damn, we're already reaching an hour.
What are you gonna do? One last shit or?
Let's do 2 takes. Let's take 1 chit.
Okay.
Let's see how it is, and if not, we'll just end it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Oh, politics. Okay, we've been kind of talking about it, so let's just give a quick rundown. I mean, if you think about it, everything we've talked about, I mean, this topic, some of them are separate, but they're inevitably gonna interlock in many instances.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty. Now that you said that, it's a pretty important point as well for since our main focus for the next probably 10 years, maybe longer, is education.
Yeah.
A huge issue with education today is the failure of linking what we learn. In other words, in school, we're taught subjects like each of them exists individually. Even though, like, for example, we have history as a standalone subject. We have history class. And the thing is, every single subject, math, English, science, psychology, whatever it may be, it has a history. Now, that's just the one example of how history is linked with every other subject, but the point is, every subject is linked with the other subject.
Exactly. And just to wrap up a brief overview of the politics shit, at least something I would like to say is okay, I'll say this just so I don't repeat
Okay.
myself. Now, what I'm gonna say, it might be a little polarizing,
Go
but
for it.
like I said at the beginning, listen to people who you don't agree with because you might just learn something new.
Oh, you will.
And it is that the traditional idea of left and right is not only outdated, but negligent, irresponsible in today's world. Because it is astounding to me, not just in the United States, but in most parts of the world, how you have to adhere to either one or the other philosophy. Because
You don't have to.
in the United States, you have to if you want to vote.
Yeah.
You either vote blue or you vote red, but you can't. And no
You
candidate.
can't run. That's even more important.
Yeah, but exactly. And
Yeah.
even if you wanted to vote for a candidate that just mixes it up and doesn't just follow a very predictable pattern,
Yeah.
which is what's happening here, they would never even get to running, like you said.
They won't be allowed
Exactly,
legally.
exactly. And that's
That's outdated
It's-
by 2 centuries.
it's hellish. It just it sets us up for failure like we've never seen before, and it's right in our noses, and people don't seem to be able to see it. And it is
I'm
that
pretty sure people see it, but there's people. What people don't see, including me, like a way out.
a way out. I mean, I'm gonna be very simplistic about it right now, but a way out is make your own damn opinions, and then
No,
the
I mean, what I meant
the
was-
politicians will follow that. Because if you stop adhering to one or the other, and there's a social push, a societal push
Yeah.
for independence of ideas and not just following a template,
Yeah.
then we'll see real change. At least that's a
So like,
start.
what you're saying is, if no one votes,
That could be one way to do it. But it's not even necessary at this point, because with the marvels that we have in social media and so forth right now, you as a group of people, as a group of individuals that share anything, and I don't think identity politics are a good thing, and we'll talk about that another day, but you can have your voice be heard, and things change now. And the same way that social media is...
Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
The same way that social media is a bottomless pit of clutterness and stupidity, it is also a place where people get to voice their opinions.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
The
everything.
technology is pretty astounding.
The technology is astounding. I'm talking about the content.
Oh,
At least in my opinion, obviously.
yeah,
Some
if
people
you-
won't agree with me.
No, like there's a very easy way around it by just unfollowing them. But the presence of them,
I mean,
of it is,
yes,
you can't
there's an
argue.
easy way around it, unfollowing them, but when the president is one of the, at least in my opinion, my humble opinion, if the president is the one cluttering your feed with nonsense,
Yeah.
then we have a problem that goes beyond following. And the only way, at least the only way that I see that we can start to have a change that will not come today or tomorrow or the day after, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take sacrifice. It's to start by making your own damn mind and not just repeating something you saw on CNN or Fox in the evening news.
See, like that's a very like I don't disagree with you, but the people who like advocate for other opinions without really informing themselves, they actually believe that's their opinion.
Exactly.
You see what I mean? Like it's not.
Oh no, 100%. That's the ultimate problem with ignorance. Is that it's a bliss. You think you're right. You're so I was before I came to college.
You can't identify ignorance in the present. You can only identify ignorance looking back.
Myself as an example. When I came to the United States for college, I was so ignorant on so many topics, and I was so set on the fact that I was right, that I didn't want to listen to other things. But at least for myself, I couldn't just not listen. And
When it's
by
all around
listening
you, yeah.
and educating myself, not necessarily agreeing with the things that I was educating myself at the time,
Yeah.
I realized that many of the things that I was preaching and that I actually genuinely believed
Yeah.
were fundamentally wrong, and they were fundamentally unbased in anything but misconceptions and cheap political machinery. and that goes into every subject. It's just not a matter of politics. It's a matter of everything. It's a matter of religion. It's a matter of, like you said, dogma.
Yeah.
Because people are born into a religion, as an example, and they automatically think that is the one way to go. And I don't find anything wrong with that, because religion gives people purpose, and that's something that we need in order to function in a
In the
society.
social fabric. Yeah.
But when religion becomes a
The pros and
weapon,
cons, yeah.
which it has become in many instances, and not just now,
I would
across
argue
history.
majority of instances.
Exactly. That's when it gets dangerous, and we shouldn't allow that. Not in today's world, not in a world of interconnectedness and information. And it is something that we see happening.
Yeah, like going back.
And
This is a very philosophical question.
exactly. And let's just not talk about. Let's not go that back. Let's not go to the obvious example, which is the Crusades.
I mean, you don't have to go. You can go to Islam.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was gonna go. The rage against the West and against the American principles that the Islamic extremists, and it's very important to be precise in that it's extremists and frankly crazy people that support these ideas. Because Islam as a religion, when it's not extremist, it's a beautiful religion.
Most religions, when it's
Exactly.
not extreme, are
That's-
perfectly
You're
fine.
completely right. I completely agree with that. It's a beautiful religion with a beautiful messages. Most are. But when you add that extremist to it, it fuels a rage against a political and a societal system. And it's fueled with anger packaged in the form of
Is
religion.
that, I mean, I could be wrong, but is that an example of identity politics?
It is. I think so. I mean,
Like, define identity politics, please.
I honestly have a hard time defining exactly what it is, but in context is where it matters. Because identity politics, at least from my understanding, different people see different things. It's not a hard set
Yeah.
idea. But in the context, identity politics is, for example, I think somewhere along the lines of, I'm Latino, so I'm going to vote for the Latino candidate,
Whatever, candidate,
and
yeah.
so on. Or
Regardless of his views.
exactly. Or on the other way, I don't know. My parents were hippies in the '60s, so I'm gonna vote for the guy that's following the hippie ideals that have turned into
Okay.
populist ideas and so
Okay.
forth. No, I could be wrong, and some people will
Yeah.
disagree with
No,
me.
we can educate ourselves on.
Exactly, but that's at least from what I've heard, from my limited understanding.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. I just
Yeah, it's kind of something that you understand in context rather than
Yeah.
going deeply into it. But yeah, we're talking about religion as a weapon.
yeah.
And I know we're going off topic, but this is all parts
No,
of
honestly,
politics.
no, like now that we brought up Islam, Islam is probably the most interconnected religion with its with the state. In the sense,
Yeah, because probably the last few states that remain theocratic, which means they base their power. They interlock their government with the church, whatever church that may be, are on its majority, if not all of them, Islamic. And,
no, yeah.
and I mean, different people have different opinions on whether this is okay or not, but the underlying fact is that it's never okay for anything to be in power when it's being detrimental, not just to people from the outside and all the different terrorist attacks that we see have happened in the recent times, but it's also detrimental to its people, because at least in my opinion, when you have religion so closely interlocked with government, innovation and progress have a hell of a lot harder time on developing than they would if religion and government were two separate houses of power. You know what I mean?
I think so.
Meaning that if you have a state that doesn't dictate a religion as their religion, and religion becomes something of a secondary thing where it's more personal and sectored than if it's part of the government, then innovation and just general push forward have a hell of a easier time moving because
would you define Israel as a religious nation?
I wouldn't, no.
Because I would.
I think
And
they
they're
definitely
pretty the technology
I think Israel
industry
is
in their country is pretty
it's an
doing pretty
example
well.
of a country that's very closely they're very
I would
closely
say
related to the religion that is part of their culture.
if it's enforced.
Yeah, but the thing exactly, it's not enforced. It's
Yeah.
secondary. You can be a Christian in Israel, and I mean, I've never been to Israel, so
Yeah.
I can't speak for a fact, but
Yeah.
I don't think the government, not the government, the local police is gonna beat you down because you're wearing a cross. Whereas if you're a woman in a theocratic Islamic nation and you're not covering your hair and so forth with a hijab, oh, you'll face consequences.
Really?
Matter of fact, I think it was in Saudi Arabia. It wasn't until recently that women were allowed to drive cars.
Yeah, that was very recent.
And that's what I'm talking about. That just closes the door on innovation and progress when you do it. And an even more extreme example of that we see in the Middle Ages,
Oh
in
yeah.
the Crusades and so forth. Knowledge was literally burned
I mean,
because they wanted to keep the population ignorant because ignorant people are easier to control than educated people,
yeah.
and they literally burned a lot of
Galileo
knowledge.
was around that time,
What?
right? Galileo.
Yeah, exactly. He was a
He was
byproduct. His
a
death was a
victim.
byproduct
Yeah.
of this
Even
obsession.
even Copernicus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's actually it's funny you mentioned because in the foreword for Nicholas Copernicus' book,
Yeah.
he makes it's almost funny to read in today's context because he literally right before he breaks down all the concepts that the Catholic Church had imparted in how the solar system and the universe was organized.
Yeah.
Right before he destroyed all that with something called science.
Yeah.
He gave a foreword saying that he was not trying to disrespect the Catholic Church.
No. You're close, but it was actually his because what he did was he was too scared actually to release his
Oh,
idea.
you're right.
He was too scared because that's how bad it was. He had figured. He found out how the Earth was in fact not the center of the universe, and he was too scared of the church because he thought he would die, he would be killed if he showed what he found mathematically proved that it was in fact the sun that was in the center of the solar system at least, and he was too scared. So he waited till his deathbed to release it, and he died. And his friend
Wrote the
prefaced the book
Yeah.
by saying, "What, dear reader."
I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah. So basically, as paraphrased by Carl Sagan, he basically said his friend basically prefaced the book by saying, "Dear reader, what you're gonna find in this book is a mere mathematical fiction. It does not obstruct our holy faith in God. It is the point of the book is just to show that if you wanna predict where Jupiter is in 2 years or whatever the time period may be, it helps by assuming that the sun is in the center of the solar system."
That's exactly it. That's what
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's crazy. That's a great example of how backwards enforcement and like the thwarting of rational thought in huge numbers is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to finish it off.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody is watching or listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And
We'll be back next week.
yeah, if somebody's listening, we're gonna be back next week, probably Tuesday.
Tuesday we'll record it to Wednesday.
Wednesday.
We'll
We'll be
figure it
back
out.
next week at
Yeah.
some point.
Alright, thank you. Sick?
Oh my fucking god.
Dude, the camera died like